Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have kind of good, bad, and I'd say really bad, but also a crazy martini for you today. Jim, let's start with the kind of good. Alejandro Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Security. He was before the U.S. Senate in the last few days testifying, and it's amazing how much data he wasn't able to have at his fingertips. All the questions from Republicans about, COVID vaccinations and, that aren't required at the border and all sorts of other things that are kind of important for our national security. He just wasn't sure. But it also came up, Kamala Harris is supposed to be the president's point person at the border. And so Josh Hawley mentioned that Harris was the most qualified person to stem the flow of migrants coming across the border. And so Josh Hawley of Missouri asked Mayorkas, do you report to her? He says, Senator, I report to the vice president. The president, in your question, misstates the facts. The president did not appoint the vice president to be the border czar. He asked her to lead the effort in addressing the root causes of irregular migration. Those are two very different things. In the end, though, it turns out Harris is not even really a player when it comes to critical policies at the border. Another question from Holly, has she been part of your policies, your decision to end remain in Mexico, to end the public charge rule, to change the ICE guidance? Has she been part of those decisions? And Mayorkas says, quote, I have not consulted with the vice president directly about those policies. And so, Jim, it kind of goes back to the old Office Space question of what is it exactly that you do here? But when it comes to Kamala Harris, we really don't know.
Greg, this is one of those odd circumstances where it's a hilarious martini. I'll classify it as that. You could say it's good. You could say it's bad, particularly from the perspective of Kamala Harris, that in some ways, Mayorkas is saying, look, the border is an absolute disaster. We continue to have month after month of huge numbers of encounters at the border with Mexico. It's an absolute travesty. We've completely dropped the ball. And it's not Kamala Harris's fault. She's barely involved with this at all. That's the good spin, I suppose you could say. The bad spin is that, look, she's is supposed to be involved with root causes in Central America. She's got nothing to do with the border. So, which obviously indicates, as you said, setting up the Office Space question of what is it you do here? Nothing's gone right on the efforts to stem the migrants. Harris did go to Central America. She did say, don't come. And that caused, quite a bit of consternation amongst the pro-amnesty, pro-migration crowd. But I don't think she got any offsetting benefit because I don't think people who are really upset about illegal immigration believe that Kamala Harris is all that bothered by this. I wrote about this a little bit earlier in the week, just saying, like, when the administration says don't come, but at the same time, they're greatly limiting what ICE enforcement is doing. They stopped construction of any border walls. They stopped workplace raids in search of illegal immigrants and things like that. Migrants and people who are thinking come to the United States, they can see all this. They hear about all this, either directly through the news or through the rumor mill. So they see two very contradictory messages from the administration. One is we are not going to do as much to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming into the country and prevent them from working as the Trump administration did. But at the same time, we don't want you to come. Well, if you do come, you have much more chance of being able to work and thrive and go on and live the life of an illegal immigrant in the United States if you do come, because the Biden administration isn't taking all the possible steps to prevent this. So it's something of a no-win situation for Kamala Harris. I do think in light of the brutal article in CNN earlier this week, she must just be feeling like when it rains, it pours. Because if this is Mayorkas trying to help her, with friends like this, who needs enemies?
No, that's exactly right. And apparently Kamala Harris told George Stephanopoulos she's not underutilized and she's getting stuff done. So I think she's trying to take credit for getting infrastructure passed and maybe some other things. I don't know. But I think it's good martini in two ways. First of all, Mayorkas dodges questions like nobody's business up on Capitol Hill. So he actually told the truth, we think, on this. And secondly, do you really want Kamala Harris setting border policy? Not that Mayorkas and his ilk are going to be a whole lot better because they're following the administration guidelines here. But I believe Kamala Harris during the campaign was very, very lenient on the border, even more so than current administration policy, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct, Greg. And I think where this, lines up and kind of becomes part of this overarching narrative. President Biden said, don't worry, the Taliban's not going to take over Afghanistan. Don't worry, we're going to get all the Americans out of Afghanistan. Don't worry, inflation is transitory. And don't worry, this is part of the regular seasonal pattern of migration at the U.S. border. So, the idea of, and don't worry, Kamala Harris is no better qualified person and she's going to be the one in charge of this. That turning out to not be true just kind of, gets added to the tapestry of things this administration say have nothing to do with reality and are entirely what they want you to think. The Build Back Better is going to cost nothing. It just kind of gets flies into that. So I think in a way, it's a demonstration that this is not the administration statements are just completely divorced from reality. And I think after a while, American people start tuning it out. So, one of the reasons Kamala Harris has this 29% approval rating in one poll, a little higher in a few others, but, generally is polling very badly, is that she seems kind of irrelevant to what's going on in the country. And that's usually, vice presidents aren't usually getting a ton of glamour and attention, but that's pretty bad, all things considered.
Well, it is. But that was the most obvious Biden lie. Because, seriously, Jim, what policy issue would you ever say there's no one more qualified to handle this than Kamala Harris?
She was a cop, metaphorically. Kamala was a prosecutor. Theoretically, she knows about law enforcement. Just she's never been all that interested in enforcing this particular law.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't seem to be putting her on those types of issues at all. So anyway, we'll see what happens for her approval numbers, for the border numbers. The October crossings were over 164,000, which is another record, way, way higher than 2 years ago. 2020 numbers are obviously skewed because of the pandemic, but definitely heading in the wrong direction all the way around. But what's not a problem in any way, shape, or form is Jim's XChair. Jim, a lot of difficult stories you've been tracking, well, really for a long time now, between COVID and Afghanistan, and now you're following, as we talked about yesterday, the fate of this Chinese female tennis player. So a lot of difficult things happening. You're spending a lot of time at your desk, but fortunately, your spine and the rest of you seems to be holding up pretty well thanks to that XChair.
Remember Calgon and how it could take you away? Almost every day now, it's XChair, take me away. And thankfully, it kind of does. Look, chances are you spend a lot of time at your desk. You spend a lot of time at work. You work hard. And if you're not taking care of your back, your neck, your shoulders, all the things that cause carpal tunnel and all of that posture, you're going to feel it eventually. If you ever had to, not use your regular office chair and you end up working at the kitchen table or something like that, you feel it. Your screen's supposed to be at eye level. Maybe you got an elevated desk, maybe you don't. But inevitably, sooner or later, that you're going to feel it, basically from the back of your skull all the way down to your tush. So you want a chair that's going to take care of you. And the XChair is, an absolute delight. I am now back in my traditional home office after the kitchen renovation. The XChair made the transition very smoothly. It rolls around. In fact, you hear it? It rolls around very easy. I can recline. I've got the vibrating session. I got the heating. I've got the cooling. The XChair does everything, and it makes working so much easier. So believe me, if you've ever had a bad chair, you would just dread getting to work. Work is hard enough as is. You shouldn't be thinking about, my sore back when you're trying to get work done. Trust me, it's worth it. Go out, get yourself an XChair, and you'll find working at your desk so much easier every day.
Jim, when you mentioned your skull, I thought we were going to get a Jeff Spicoli line from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But yeah, the XChair is fantastic. Go to XChairMartini.com now. That's the letter XChair, MARTINI.com. Or call 1-844-4XChair for $100 off your order. XChair has a 30-day guarantee of complete comfort, and you can finance your purchase for as little as $30 per month. XChairMartini.com. All right, Jim, let's move on to our bad martini now here. And this one's definitely bad because Attorney General Merrick Garland was just testifying a number of days ago about how conservatives totally took his FBI memo about school board disruptions and potential domestic terrorist allegations against parents way out of context. He says, that might have been mentioned in that letter from the National School Board Association, but we're not talking about people's rights to disagree and disagree even very loudly with school board policy. That's First Amendment. We're always going to protect that. This is only about actual threats against people. Well, now we have a whistleblower who is suggesting a very different story. This is from Yahoo. Citing an internal email provided by an FBI whistleblower, Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee revealed Tuesday that the Bureau has created a system to track threats against the school board officials and administrators, and accused Attorney General Merrick Garland of misleading lawmakers when he was asked about the subject during his previous testimony before the committee. The FBI's counterterrorism and criminal divisions created a threat tag, EDU officials, to track instances of related threats. According to the email, quote, the purpose of the threat tag is to help scope this threat on a national level and provide an opportunity for comprehensive analysis of the threat picture for effective engagement with law enforcement, unquote. The email was signed by the Assistant Director of the Counterterrorism Division and former Criminal Division Assistant Director who retired earlier this month. Jim Jordan, top Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, wrote that the whistleblower email provides specific evidence that federal law enforcement employed counterterrorism tools against concerned parents. FBI denying that in a statement to the Wall Street Journal, saying FBI has never been in the business of investigating parents. So, Jim, do we believe the whistleblower or do we believe the FBI response?
Well, you asked for miracles. I give you the FBI. Greg, I think I'd like to see additional verification of what this whistleblower is saying. It's certainly plausible in light of that cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs letter from the National Association of School Boards, in which they did not consult with any of their state branches and apparently didn't consult with lots of other folks before they basically said, FBI, come on, get on this. This is the biggest threat we're facing. Kind of as I alluded to earlier in this podcast, there is this, whenever the Biden administration steps in it, there's always this statement you usually can find from administration officials saying, well, we just aren't communicating it right, or, we aren't winning the messaging battle or something like that. I think it reflects an administration that tends to see almost every single problem that comes down the pike as a messaging problem, as it's entirely a spin or political communication problem. And in fact, in many cases, it is a substance problem. The problem is not the messaging. The problem is the problem. And I kind of have this, look, you can agree with the parents at these school board meetings or you can disagree with them. I do think that certainly the case we saw in Fairfax County, there was stuff in books available in school libraries that was simply not appropriate, certainly not appropriate for elementary schools or middle school students. And maybe it's okay for high schoolers, depending on the level of maturity, but the world has a lot of books. Maybe you don't need that in a high school library. And other issues of, who gets to use which bathrooms, the cover-up of sexual assaults. These are big, consequential events that parents have every right in the world to be really, really mad about. There was that one particular incident, the father of the daughter who'd been assaulted, where he got into a tussle with the cops. Don't hit cops. That's not good. Although I think everybody can understand why the guy would be beside himself with anger and exasperation with the school board on this. So, but as you and I have been saying from the very beginning of this, why this would require a federal response and an FBI response was never quite clear. There was never any indication that local police, generally if you have one or two cops at the school board meeting, everything's going to work out fine. The vast majority of parents, no matter how angry they are, they're not aspiring terrorists. They're not Timothy McVeighs. And the idea of an FBI needing to get involved in this is just wildly disproportionate. And the counterterrorism group just, seems utterly beside itself. And it comes out of this instinctive response that we find, I suppose you can find it on both sides, but it's all over progressivism. This idea where, your words are violence to me, and therefore they need to be suppressed. They need to be shut down. You need to be thrown out of your job for your words. But when you see these defenses of rioting and the idea of, the idea that my violence is just words, my violence is just actually just expressing these viewpoints. So look, it was this idea of treating people as criminals, as potential terrorists because of what they were saying, because of what they believed. Look, I think the burden of proof is on the FBI here. I really think they can't just say, trust us on this. You can throw in Russiagate, you can throw in Peter Strzok, you could throw in all kinds of incidents in which the FBI has not lived up to the high standards it likes to proclaim. and deeply disturbing that we have a administration and a law enforcement community who are so instinctively ready to treat U.S. citizens who have not broken any laws as potential terrorists, and we have the entire full weight of the counterterrorism organizations thrown at them as a preventative measure, I suppose.
Seems like every day we hear something about Merrick Garland that makes me more appreciative for Republican strategy in 2016. I don't like him as Attorney General either, but I'd rather have him there for hopefully 4 years or less than on the Supreme Court for 20 or 25. So anyway, this guy has pretty much shredded his identity, I think, as a fair and balanced lawman here. All right. Well, speaking of balance, you want a balanced portfolio when it comes to your investments. And with the dollar value not exactly heading in the direction we want it to, silver and gold can be a very lucrative way to keep your portfolio where you want it to be. And silver, for example, is definitely an attractive investment right now. In fact, the price of silver has increased 340% since 2000 and continues trending higher. And if you want to add that to your portfolio, there's no smarter way to do it than through Universal Coin and Bullion.
Universal Coin and Bullion is offering our listeners a special locked-in price of just $30 for a beautiful 1-ounce 2021 American Silver Eagle coin. Just happens to be the most popular coin in the world for collectors and investors. Now, this limited offer is available at dealer's cost because Universal Coin wants you to own the first newly designed silver bullion coin since President Reagan signed the Gold Bullion Act in 1985. Call Universal Coin, leaders in the precious metals industry, at 1-800-UCB-GOLD to get your beautiful U.S. Mint silver coin for only $30. Postage is free, and you will be dealing with the experts.
Now, when you get your silver and your gold, like Jim and I have just said, you want to be dealing with the smartest, the most knowledgeable, the most honest people you can. And that's one of the reasons we like Universal Coin and Bullion. Dr. Mike Fulgens is America's gold expert, as recognized by the U.S. government, and he's the 2021 Coin Dealer of the Year. They also have at UCB rare gold coins, but this special silver deal is only available using the code Martini. So call 800-UCB-GOLD. That's 800-UCB-GOLD. All right, Jim, let's move to our, what I think is really bad Martini, but it's also crazy/sad because we knew this long before he became president, but Americans are catching up in larger numbers now because they see this guy on a regular basis. Politico with the story. Voters have increasing doubts about the health and mental fitness of President Biden, the oldest man ever sworn into the White House, according to a new Politico and Morning Consult poll. Only 40% of voters agreed with the statement that Biden, quote, is in good health, while 50% disagreed. That 10 percentage point gap, which is outside the poll's margin of error, represents a massive 29-point shift since October 2020, when Morning Consult last surveyed the question and found voters believed Biden was in good health by a 19-point margin. Asked whether Biden is mentally fit, voters are also evenly split, with 46% saying he is and 48% disagreeing. But that negative 2-point margin stands again in stark contrast to Biden's numbers from last October, when voters believed he was mentally fit by a 21-point margin. Biden turned 79 years old on Saturday. And Jim, I don't think either of us are excited about the fact that Joe Biden is president. We have virtually unanimous disagreement with him on almost every policy, the Olympic diplomatic boycott this week being a notable exception. But despite the fact we don't prefer him as president and don't like his policies, we don't want anyone in that office who is mentally unfit. And as the evidence piles up, the American people seem to be reaching a conclusion here, at least certainly trending strongly in one direction.
Greg, when you hear people talking about this outside of conservative circles, they tend to soft pedal it. And Biden's lost a little speed off his fastball. I think John Ellis diagnosed how often you saw these kind of subtle metaphors of Biden not being as sharp as he used to be, but kind of downplaying it, saying it's not that bad. Look, America had a picture of Joe Biden in its head from the years that he was vice president, 2008 to 2016. And then Joe Biden went into the private sector, made a bundle, wrote a book, And then he chose to run for president again, and we saw him more often in 2019. And it was not the same guy. That it seemed like in just a span of a couple of years, he looked like he had aged a decade. And he had always been old, but kind of physically and full of energy and kind of this cantankerous, wacky neighbor of the Obama years. But he looked different. Mentally, physically, you could see it in the way he spoke. I heard a lot of coverage about Joe Biden and his stutter, and congratulations to Joe Biden for overcoming his stutter. But we weren't seeing stuttering on the debate stage. We were seeing kind of what I characterize as word salad, right? He'd begin a sentence and then he'd kind of pause and he'd have a separate thought, and you could see he hadn't finished the first one, but he'd inject it, and then he'd put a third. Then he'd go back to the first one. It was this, it wasn't utterly incoherent, but it was not the guy we were used to. But fine, he wins the election. He's in the job. We'll knock on wood and hope for the best. And I think where it really became almost impossible to ignore came around the collapse of Kabul and the situation in Afghanistan. I think it was for a good 6 days, Biden was either not making any public appearances, or when he did, he was issuing statements and reading off a teleprompter and then not taking any questions. He did do one interview eventually. It was the one with George Stephanopoulos. And I think that was the one that most strongly suggested to me something was really wrong. And I wrote about this at the time. And I got grief from the likes of Chris Cillizza at CNN that this was the lowest form of politics. And said, well, look, I'm sorry. It is not normal when an anchor describes the guy hanging to the plane and falling off for the president of the United States to have this outburst. That was 4 or 5 days ago, man. It was just, there was something not right about that. He emotionally wasn't responding the right way. He wasn't. His answers were jumbled. It was this weird, defensive, angry, prickly, not just politically unwise, but there was just something that didn't seem right about him. Maybe it's a physical, maybe it's mental, maybe it's the stress of the job. It certainly would seem to be an age issue, and not the Biden we're used to seeing. Now, when this poll came out, Democratic pollster Celinda Lakes, dismissed it and said this is just a right-wing disinformation machine, et cetera. Oh, in this poll, independents by 23 points think that Biden is not mentally fit now. He's been in the public eye for decades. We know what's normal for Joe Biden, and we know what we're seeing is not the normal for Joe Biden. We've talked about his light schedule. You may have noticed he almost never does nighttime events. He has not sat down for an extended on-camera interview with any major journalist. Every once in a while, he'll do a TV one. Every once in a while, he'll take questions at the end of a statement. But he does not sit down and do a primetime interview the way Obama did or Trump enjoyed doing with Fox News hosts all the time. You probably noticed he spent a lot of time at his Delaware home. I don't begrudge the president that, but, if you spend your whole life trying to get into the White House, it's very strange to be so eager to get away from it. And then there's like the simple issue of memory lapses that he insisted he was never briefed that they recommended keeping Bagram Air Base open and all that kind of stuff. Military advisors testified before Congress, yes, we did tell the president we recommended this, and he did have these options. So that could just be Biden lying. That's not good either. But I also wonder, it's fair to ask, well, maybe Biden isn't remembering what he's told in his briefings. And I'd like finally, kind of the last thing to think about, as you mentioned, he turned 79. Back in May, I think the last time Biden released any health information was sometime like late 2019. Okay, it's November 18th, 2021. It's almost 2 years. Back in May, the administration said, he's going to have a physical, he's going to have a checkup, and we will release the results of that. Hasn't happened yet. They said it would happen by the end of the year. TikTok, and I don't mean the social media network.
Well, no, that's certainly the case. And, that's an interesting spot for the media to be in, because I remember them demanding a lot of health information at times about Trump and certainly at times about Reagan. And Reagan had a number of health issues during his 8 years, from getting shot to having colon cancer. So, but there doesn't necessarily seem to be the same demand for transparency when it's a Democratic president. But this is the first time in a while we've had a much older Democratic president. I mean, the last 3 Democratic presidents were pretty young when they were in office. Much different situation with Joe Biden now. So we're not going to, again, speculate on what exactly is happening. But I think Americans who have paid attention not only for a while and know what Joe Biden used to be like as a senator and a vice president, but just those who've been able to watch over the nearly first year of this administration, just get the instinct that something's not right.
The first health condition he's dealing with is being 79 years old.
Yeah.
We all have parents who get up there in years. We all know that maybe the mental clarity and focus is not what it used to be. I hope the president gets checked out, and I hope everything's fine. I don't think that's the case. I'm concerned that's the case. But we will see. But again, it would be better if there's more information than this rather than less, sooner rather than later. And if there is something wrong with the president, there really needs to be a very honest discussion between him and Jill and his top advisors. As much as we dread President Kamala Harris, like if the president can't mentally handle the job, there's no point in hiding it, and this really puts the country at great risk.
Well, this is going to be a problem for Prime Minister Klain, though, right?
Yeah, it's a good point. Does he keep his job? I don't know.
I don't know. Well, if she was forced to take all the Biden staffers, I'm guessing if she were to become president, I think the Harris people would be moving in and the Biden people will be moving out, but we'll see about that. Anyway, we certainly wish the best for the president on his health, but transparency is also critically important when a plurality of the American people are convinced now that the president's not where he needs to be to do the job. So, Jim, on that note, we will reconvene tomorrow. See you then. Have a good Thursday.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Tell your friends about us as well. We are very grateful for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us on Twitter. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Thursday, and please join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.
We are living in difficult times where people fear having thought-provoking conversations about pressing issues. And although we're in the midst of an information explosion, there are a lot of forces aiming to distort what's true. I created The Bill Walton Show to provide a forum for in-depth, thought-provoking conversations with leaders, artists, entrepreneurs, and thinkers. Please join me at thebillwaltonshow.com to explore what's true, what's right, and what's next.